My dear friends, I want to speak to you today about recycling. You know that this is something that lies on my heart. I will start by just a few slides, but the points I want to discuss are related to the options of recycling because I see there is much confusion on this subject, and it's important to add some clear water into this term subject. And so bear with me. I will. So here it is. And so this is the presentation. I want to start by saying that, of course, what we are talking is related to sustainability, and we all should be aware that there is a pyramid of sustainability. This is in Portuguese language, but you understand. The first one here is avoid. Of course, when you can avoid waste, that is what you should do. If nothing is better than to avoid some waste, but in many cases, this is not possible. We use materials, we need materials to sustain our way of life, and these materials, at the end of their lives, they will become waste. And then, what are the options that we have? You can, of course, recycle the material. You can do material recovery, and then, of course, last resources should do energy recovery of incineration, and the last would be landfill that we need to avoid because of their impact into the nature. But having said that, so let's go and analyze what are really the subject here. I'm talking about plastics. And plastics are materials that are derived from fossil. Is a fossil, and then you extract from the earth, and then you produce naphtha. And for naphtha, most of the plastics are produced. There are two types. Plastics are macromolecules. Macromolecules, it means that they are built from units called the monomers, and those units are derived most from naphtha or from natural gas today. And this is, of course, fossil. They are called hydrocarbons, and hydrocarbons because they are composed of hydrogen and carbons. So basically, that is what you have. You have some other atoms called heteroatoms, but basically is hydrogen and carbon. So polymers are very long molecules produced from monomer, repeating units of those monomer thousands of times, and very long molecule, essentially carbon and hydrogen. There are two types of polymers. There is the plastics and there is elastomers. Elastomers are rubber, no, but basically they are built on the same structure. No monomers that are polymerized and become very long molecules, and both are basically carbon and hydrogen. There are some other molecules that are added. There is a difference between the polymers and the material which the polymers are made, the plastics or the rubber, is that there is a lot of additional materials, additives. And these additives are done because of certain purpose we want to obtain, the structural purpose, but also colors, also all the kinds of additives that are done to the plastics will perform the way you want. There are thousands of different additives. So the composition of the plastics is very complex. 50,000 additives is a number that you can trust me. That is there. 50,000 different additives in different plastics, special colors or color compositions. This is what make plastic recycling very tough because they are not pure materials. They are mixed materials from the beginning. And it's not about the cleaning of the product that they have a care that they stay there as well, because that is an addition, because the plastics are hydrophobic and they will absorb all the kinds of materials they transport or they come in contact into their polymer constitution. So you cannot really wash out the contaminants. That is a big problem. It's very difficult to wash out. Of course, if you have clean water and have not been contaminated, better. Then you have less of this problem. But even bottle is not pure. There is a lot of substance in the bottles, from colors to uh, um, catalysts that have been used. They're still there in the plastics, and this creates problems. Um, but of course, if you could reuse the polymers, that's also a good thing. A recycle, simply reusing the polymer, but that is not always possible. So when that's not possible, the options that you have, I have to discuss. Here I discussed what plastics are done. Here are the options of the plastic. In the end of of their life, there are two types of plastics. There are those biodegradable plastics. It's very important to understand that very few plastics are biodegradable. And those biodegradable plastics is very difficult to control because they will degrade in contact with any water or fluids, and that is not what you want. So biodegradable plastics already exist, and they are used in the medicine. Quite many of them are related to medical plastics, because when you have a surgery and you add some plastic to the patient, you don't want to open again to remove the plastics. You want that the plastic will be reabsorbable by the organism. So that's the reason we have developed those biodegradable plastics, but they are too expensive. They are not to be used in the common. Most of the plastic waste that we have are packaging plastic. 60% is packaging plastic. And of course, those plastics cannot be used as packaging plastic. Second, there is a huge misconception, because people say biodegradable, they think in bioplastic, all the bioplastics are biodegradable. This is just not true. This is just a misconception, an error. And of course, the industry that produce those plastics, sometimes they leave the public in the dark. They don't explain exactly, because they want you to make this mistake to confound a bioplastic with biodegradable because it's better for their story. But this is greenwashing. So watch out for greenwashing here. Biodegradable plastics are polyalkanoate, or polylactate. They are biodegradable. And of course, there are also materials that are not plastics that you can use, starch and so, but they are not resistant. They don't fulfill the purpose of the plastics they want to substitute. And if you want to substitute something, you need to be able to perform on that. It's not only that you are compostable, you need to perform at the supermarket. If you are a biocompostable, a compostable bag, you need to be able to have resistance to transport the material. You don't want you put some wet material in the bag, and the bag decompose while you are on the bus or going home. So you don't want this situation to happen. Or in the shelves of the supermarket, bottles in contact with the liquid that will then decompose. You don't want that to happen to your product. And if you buy the product, you want to come home with this integrity of the product. So composting is possible in a few cases. Most of the plastic, this is less than 1%, much less than 1% is really biocomposed. Bioplastic is 1%, but bioplastic is very few bioplastics are really compostable. Not all the other plastics, including bioplastics, they are not biodegradable. That's very clear. Reuse, as I said, is an option, but it's very limited by their applicability because the plastics will contain those components that you call contaminants or additives, or catalysts that are in the plastics, and this is not allowed in certain applications, high quality applications like the food industry, like the biomedical plastics. You are not really able to do reuse of plastics, and it's crazy. If you try to do that, reuse plastics, you will have carryover, you have cross contaminations, you will increase the rate of infections. You don't want to do that. So what are the options if you don't have reuse? What are plastics then not recyclable? This is a quite discussion. I want to say plastics are recyclable. We can recycle plastics, and if plastic has not been recycled so far, it's because nobody was interested in that, in develop those technologies for recycle. But what are the technologies? I will speak about mechanical recycle and chemical recycle. Incineration is not recycling. Incinerations, of course, is a solution, especially if it's coupled to carbon dioxide capture, because what you do with incineration, you convert all the plastic into heat. No, and of course, in certain areas, and especially we need heat. Industry also needs heat, needs steam. So that's a way of producing steam. The problem of incineration is that you produce a lot of CO2 emissions, a lot of CO2 emission. And then is the question, what you do? You can capture those CO2. This is new technologies, being developed. Those technologies, if they come forward, and if you have, of course, all the incinerations with carbon capture and utilization, then of course you have an option, an additional option. But today, incineration is not a recycling option. Incineration gets rid of the material, but then producing emissions, and what we want to avoid is CO2 production. Now, chemical recycle that then does not produce CO2. You have the technology, you can depolymerize the materials, but this is also very limited. It's under development. There are certain polymers, especially when they are very clean and they are polycondensation polymers like PET is a polycondensation. It's possible to depolymerize, and you break and you obtain the monomers. And of course, the monomers are the unit you can repolymerize and produce the plastics. So when you can do this, no depolymerization, production of monomer, that's a very good option for you. And this is a technology that in many cases already being used in the case of bottle-to-bottle recycling. And this is good. There's nothing to discuss about that. It's a very clean way to produce new bottles out of old bottles. But it requires that the plastics are homogeneous. It requires that the bottles are very clean. And if you have a mixture, if you have a mixed plastics, you cannot use that. This will not work for different reasons. Then you have, if it cannot do depolymerization, what about chemical recycling? Yes, chemical recycling works. There are two major technologies for chemical recycling. One is pyrolysis, which is an anoxic breakdown, an internal breakdown, a thermal breakdown of the polymers. When you break down the polymers, you don't break the polymers to the monomers. You break the polymers statistically. Statistically means that all the forms, the possible forms, it is a normal distribution, will be in the soup. All the form, and there is not a single product. This make it very used. You end up with oil fractions, which are all the polymers that become less than 20 or 30. They will be around 20, no? They will become oil. They will become liquid, and you form the oil. This is the pyrolysis oil. But pyrolysis oil contains all the possible forms and branches of the plastics, of the original plastic, and all the contaminants in the liquid form. It's very difficult to separate. So most of the projects with pyrolysis oil end up burning the oil in the furnace. And that's the problem. If you are going to burn, well, why not use incineration? It's the most direct way to produce. If you're going to burn the plastics, I don't see the point in going to, you don't win anything thermodynamically to go through a chemical process, add a chemical process, and still burn the product. So it does not make a lot of sense unless you really need the pyrolysis oil for some reason. And of course, you have the oil and the char. The char is carbon in its form, but carbon contaminated with everything that was on the plastics. So it's not really pure char. But there are applications for those chars. So if you go for those specific applications of the pyrolysis oil, chemical application, not burning it, it can be interesting. But the technology, really, I want to focus, the one that I choose to drive, it is gasification. Traditional gasification was done at very high temperature, and that's the reason people have tried, but gasification has been around for 200 years, and people say, oh, no, it's not economically feasible. Yes, gasification at very high temperature is a problem because the temperature eats up all the economics, because it's very expensive process to have the temperature, such a high temperature in the process. And normally it's not economical feasible. We need that. We knew that. We knew that for 30 years ago. And when I started, that was the thing, how to reduce, how to make gasification a really economical option. And I must confess that, of course, we managed to do that. We have today the gasification process that is economically feasible. The questions that I always ask, people say, oh, but gasification demands energy. All the process demands energy. The question that you have to ask is, does do plastic have energy enough to drive the reactions? And this is a good question. You have to compare those plastics to fossil oil because nobody asks these questions of oil is used as energy source. So those plastics compared to oil, well, the mixed plastics has everything. Now, mixed plastic is 39 megajoules per kilo, 39 megajoules per kilo. A purified plastics, HDPE, high density polyethylene, has around 44 and oil has around 45. So it's very close. It's very close. And of course, you don't be surprised because you know that plastics are coming from fossil oil. So this is the major ingredient in fossil oil. That's why they are called hydrocarbons, no? Because they are in the class, they are there. And plastics, because naphtha has been purified from many contaminants, so plastics are much more pure than fossil oil. So you are already taking, and important to note that plastics has already been removed. So plastics are used, are removed from the wells, from the earth, and then they are made to some products. You use the product, and then you have the waste. So this is a way of taking care of the waste. And of course, you can use the energy in the plastics to drive the gasification, the low temperature gasification, which is autothermal. The high temperature gasification you cannot do because plastic does not have enough energy to sustain this high temperature. But when we reduce the temperature, we have the solution for that. So we do the gasification. What is the product of gasification? The product of gasification is always single one, syngas. And syngas is a gas composed of hydrogen and carbon monoxide. And since they are now being not fossil because they are a secondary material now, it's a secondary feedstock. They are coming from the plastics, which has already been used, which is a problem, though. We know that plastic is a problem in the nature, so we can convert the plastics to syngas. Why is syngas important at all? Because let me just go, here it is, to show you this picture, what you can do with syngas. In fact, out of syngas, you can do everything. Syngas is a commodity in the chemical industry for the production of methanol. And out of methanol, you can do olefins, which is the base of new plastics. So syngas is the base for producing not only that, you can produce olefins here straight away, but you can do a lot more. You can, of course, just separate the syngas, and then you have here a way of producing hydrogen. You just separate the carbon monoxide that you send to the methanol synthesis. Carbon monoxide is the base for the C1 chemistry, you call C1 chem, and that is the most common is the production of methanol. But for methanol, you have acetic acid, and you have many things that you can do in basically all the chemistry. So you can convert the waste into renewable feedstock for the chemical industry. This is very important. This is the base of this really sustainability because we can decouple the chemistry, the chemical industry from the primary fossil sources and use then waste to do that. And of course, if you convert plastics to methanol, a methanol to olefin, you close the loop. This is the best you can do. You close the loop, and then you have plastics to plastics with the same quality. That is the big difference from mechanical process, no, the mechanical recycling, because mechanical recycling is limited by the number of cycles you can do. You have the polymer. Every time you hit the polymer, the molecules will break. The molecules will break, and by breaking, it will lose its physical characteristics and not perform as it was intended. That is why you cannot really call it a recycle. You are downcycling the material. After 2, 3 rounds of recycling, the material is not used, and then you go to incineration or landfill. It's not really, and there are many more problems with mechanical recycling. So the idea that you can recycle polymers by mechanical recycle is not really working, has never really worked. It is very, very limited. And we have to face reality. We have to face the truth. There's no point in greenwashing here because we're not going anywhere with greenwashing. So that is what I want to stress here. And I thank you for listening to that point. Thank you.